to the Illusionist Interrogations with the travesty starring Les Arnold.
Welcome to the 6th Illusionist Interrogation podcast. I'm the Travesty, and today we're going to be learning a bit about our next guest. He is a magician, builder. He's the grandson of the great Leon. He's performed at Masters of Illusion and traveled around the world as a duo act with his daughter Dazzle. Put your hands together for Les Arnold.
How you doing, Travis?
Great. How are you doing?
Hanging in there.
Have you been doing any Zoom shows?
Well, let me tell you. I did, what was it? Collector's Corner with David Sandy.
Yeah.
And, hey, for the most part, that's it. I talked to my friend Dana Daniels. He's doing some Zoom shows. But like a lot of other guys, we're not doing a hell of a lot of anything, tell you the truth.
Yeah.
One time in my life, I'm as busy as David Copperfield.
So, let's rewind a little. Let's go back to the start. How'd you get into magic?
That's a good question. Obviously, my grandfather was a vaudeville headliner, and his name was the Great Leon. And but that's not really what got me started. I was kind of young at the time and really didn't even think about that or have it in the back of my mind. My brother had a Misto magic set, and he's 6 years older than me. And my brother Ed and I would go with my dad to a number of conventions, like Legionnaire conventions. He was very active in, Veterans of Foreign Wars, American Legion, et cetera, et cetera. And anyhow, my brother would do the nickels to dimes trick for Legionnaires. But instead of nickels to dimes, he would borrow 4 nickels. And instead of turning them into dimes, he would make them disappear. One day, years passed, and I was looking in the closet. I'm about 10 years old, and I found my brother's magic set. And of course, that trick where he made 20 cents every time he did it impressed me. And I got into it. And that's kind of how I got hooked into it. And then from there, there was a place called the New Pike in Long Beach, where I grew up. I had a magic shop. And I went in there and started buying magic tricks. And then the ball started rolling from there. And then there's a whole plethora of a story that I can go from there. You want to comment on that?
I mean, hey, you can go.
It sounds like everybody else's story, right? So basically, that's how I got started in magic.
All right.
And whatever. And living in Long Beach, my parents would let me go down to the magic shop once a week and buy another trick. And the following week, I bought some Adams cups and balls. And I think it might have been around this time of the year, Thanksgiving. The Great Leon's son, who was my mom's brother, my uncle, was also a magician. And my Uncle Leon came down for Thanksgiving. And I showed him my little Adams cups and ball routine. And from that, he inspired me to, kind of go along with it. He gave me some more tricks. And the next thing was he said, hey, there's a magic club in Long Beach, California. It's called the Long Beach Mystics. And a fellow by the name of Merlin Eifert was kind of like their advisor to it. And he was a member of the IBM Ring 96 at the time. And they were sponsoring the Young Club. And I was put in contact with him. And I went to one of their meetings, and I joined the club. And that particular club was founded in 1955 by in the back of a little hobby shop that sold trains and other hobbies, and it grew from there. I was not an original member. I came in around 1959, around November of 1959. Yeah, so I was 4 years into the club. Then I hung in there for quite a few years, and as you know, there's a lot of professional magicians today that with familiar names. They came out of the Long Beach Mystics.
Can you name a few?
Well, sure. Let's see. one of the charter members back then was James Hamilton. That was his stage name. His real name was Jim Mazalski, and he was 3 years older than me. And Jim was a charter member. There was Eric Sadler. Both those guys have since passed away. Another one was Bob Scherzinger, and who was my age at the time, Tom Gardner. And then as far as the names that you're going to recognize that came in about, I would say maybe, about 10 years after I was already a member. I was 19 at the time. Stan Allen, who had Magic Magazine and also does the Magic Live convention. And Mike Caveney was living out towards Pasadena, and any rate, and he couldn't join until he got a driver's license. So he was about 16 when he came. You got people like Kevin James, you got Mark Kalin, you have Bill Smith, who is quite the builder in Magic. You got Rick Thomas, you have Victor and Diamond. And there's quite a span of years from when these guys came in. I mean, there's some of these guys that, like Dana Daniels is another one that, I'm a senior of those guys by, 15 years or more. Also, you got Steve Keeler, who builds props professionally. And
you got a good club.
So quite a few names of guys that came out of the club, and I'm sure if I think of them, I'll give you the name. Scott Bryan was another one who was in the first Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Circus College, and then toured with the show. So yeah, everybody did well. And then later years of Ron Anderson. So I don't know how many of these names might have, hit you to where you recognize the names.
A lot of them do.
It's quite a few. And we had guys that used to come and hang out at our club meetings that were my age, like, Jim Barlow and his buddy Steve Martin, the Steve Martin that became famous, actor, comedian, magician. He was on one of our annual shows back when we were in college. His career really took off. I have to give him that. So, there's some of the guys that came out of the Long Beach Mystics, and that are names, obviously, that are familiar with your listeners.
So when was your first show?
Well, believe it or not, other than doing some tricks for my neighbors, in the garage, you set up, every trick you have on a table, charging a nickel or something for the neighborhood kids to come in and see it. I had a next door neighbor who was an invalid, and she was a member of a organization called Indoor Sports. And I would have been about maybe 10 or 11. And they would ask for entertainment and say, hey, you want to put on a show? And so it was all these invalid people that would once a month go to this potluck dinner, and they had a stage. And I guess that was pretty much my first show. And on my first show, my mom had built me a little miniature theater. Similar to, I didn't know it, but it was similar to, I guess, my grandfather's haunted house that he built in his retirement. And along with that, I also did his pillory escape that he had come up with. So, and that would have been, like I said, before I was actually a member of the Long Beach Mystics. And then, of course, after joining the Mystics, then you're involved in activities once a month with shows that we put on, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So tell me a bit about your grandfather and some of the illusions that he'd worked with. I know the dollhouse is one of them.
Well, let me fill you in, and so that, rather than you racking your brain and trying to think back on some of the stuff. And Mike Caveney, who, besides a great performer, is also publisher and author of books, and has published quite a few books. And one of them was on my grandfather, the great Leon. And as a matter of fact, any listener, if you come across it, this is the book, The Great Leon by Mike Caveney. And he was a vaudeville headliner, and vaudeville was the type of entertainment that you had at the turn of the 20th century. Like, he was big in, he was born in 1875, and so he was performing throughout the country and the world, as started as a teenager, and he would give himself particular names and keep reinventing himself every couple of years. And vaudeville was a variety show that traveled around, and the Orpheum circuit was one. You've got a number of other venues and stuff. And each week they would change out these variety shows that would consist of magicians, jugglers, dancers, singers, etc. And it was quite popular until, of course, talkies in the movies came out and kind of killed vaudeville. But he was famous for a couple of illusions, the fire and water illusion, which consisted of them filling a tank suspended on 4 chains in a framework, center stage, with water. And they would fly out all the curtains and backdrops so that there wasn't anything where you could see people, entering towards the apparatus at all. And my grandmother, Edith, was the It's Me Again girl. She got nicknamed that because every time she'd reappear after vanishing somewhere, I guess she would yell, "It's me again." And and that was Grandpa's partner, which was Grandma. And that illusion, she came out and she stood on a table. She was covered with a cloth, and they set the cloth ablaze, and they closed curtains around the water tank, which was on the other side of the stage, about 15, 20 feet away, depending on the size of the stage. And all of a sudden, the burning cloth dropped down to the table. They pulled the curtain back away from the water tank, and there was Grandma, in this enclosed water tank that had a lid that was strapped on. For any of your listeners that are curious, we recreated this illusion on Masters of Illusion, and it might be titled, you look for Les Arnold and Dazzle, and or you go to, Les Arnold and Dazzle.com.
I'll link it in the description below if I can find it. That sounds awesome.
It's on YouTube, and you can see the illusion where we had performed it. Then, of course, some other years went by, and there was the time that he came up with, there was a lot happening in science, and he would always jump on the bandwagon of that kind of stuff. It's, lasers or, death ray gun and all that. And he decided to do the death ray gun. And the death ray gun was where they brought a cannon out, and they put a woman in this big bullet-like shell. You could see her face through a little hole. And they loaded her into this cannon. And just like you saw in the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus, where, they'd have the guy put in a cannon and shot across the stage. It was that kind of a deal. They erected a net. They had a lead shield that was on display in the lobby prior to the show, and they would put that in front of the cannon. They would shoot and penetrate the lead shield, and she would fall into the net. So that was another thing. And then, of course, when they in the early 20s, when they discovered King Tut's tomb, and everybody was excited about the pyramids and King Tut, blah, blah, blah. Anybody that was jumping on the bandwagon, he would, he'd do a Hindu character or whatever, just to, or something from the Far East to represent, just to cash in on what was hot for the time. So he did a number of things. And then to answer your question regarding, I think it was regarding the haunted house.
Yeah.
Did you say, or the pillory?
Dollhouse or haunted house. There we go.
Dollhouse. That was in his retirement. He had a heart attack in the 30s, and Grandma decided, it's time to retire, and they sold the show to Levant, and Australian illusionist. And any rate, so in retirement, to keep himself busy, he came up with a number of award-winning illusions and so forth and so on. And one of them was the dollhouse illusion. And what it did, it consisted of a little girl's dollhouse, and he would tell a story about this ghost in the house, and as he's explaining, to the people, this house is sitting on a table. The front door would open, and then and you got to think back. This is back in the 40s. You didn't have the electronics and the stuff that you could do today.
Yeah.
So the window would then open, and a little ghost, and then he'd finally take the front of the house off, and you would see into the house. It had like a proscenium march, and then he would proceed to put different things in there that would, a hammer would rise up and tap, and you could ask somebody some questions and tap twice for yes and once for no, etc., like that. Ring a bell, a table would float, a gun would rise up and go bang and shoot. You put a bottle of milk in there with a little bowl, and it would pour. So it did all these magical effects. So that was the gist of the dollhouse. As a matter of fact, my friend John Carney put together a great routine regarding the Leon Haunted House, and they did publish a book on how to build it, and show you all the different items that you might have for the thing. And
What was the title of the book?
The Great Leon's Haunted House. It's not hardbound. It's like a paper deal with the plastic binder in the back. It has photographs in it, etc. You'll see them come up for sale on auctions and stuff every now and then, but it's out there. You could probably Google it and it would come up.
Yeah, the dollhouse in general is one of my favorite tricks. I got 2 of them.
Okay. Oh, okay. I have one of the original dollhouses that was given to me by my ancestors. So,
how many original tricks do you have from back then?
What's that?
How many original tricks do you have from like your?
I have the original pillory, and I have one of the original dollhouses, and there's a box that. Hang on a minute. Okay, Mike Caveney gave me this. This was another item that my grandfather came up with in retirement, and it happens to be a box that has. Let's see here. How do you open the damn thing? I've never done it. At any rate, it opens up like this. It's got a sheet of glass that slides.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, let's see how. Okay. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you put this piece of glass in here, and you close up the doors. I do not have any of the stakes. It was a gift. Mike Caveney gave it to me. But my grandfather marketed this also in his retirement. And then you'll notice on all the sides it has holes, and there's like 14 spikes that you shove in all of these different holes that you can see.
That's cool.
And it, and you have this sheet of glass in there, so it's like a penetration.
Yeah.
That was another item. Some of the other stuff, I'm not that hip on. I mean, I'm not a guy that is into the history of magic a lot, like some of my friends, like Mike Caveney and stuff. You'll actually, if you're interested in probably about my own doggone family, they would know more. I mean, I could tell you about family pets and stuff like that, but it is what it is. And then my uncle, which was his son, also was a performer after Grandpa passed away. He really didn't hit it off as being a performer while his father was alive. They had totally different styles. Grandpa was a fast-moving illusionist. My Uncle Leon was a comedy magician that would do pitch acts that were, and primarily, played for the local SAM, IBM, et cetera, et cetera. And he was, by profession, he was a sound engineer in the movie industry. And matter of fact, when you're filming a scene and they have the little clapboard that has on, scene 2, take 3, and they go, action.
I got one around here somewhere.
Yeah, he invented that. So if you look up movie clapper Leon, it'll come up.
That's
because
awesome.
I think there's a couple of different studios they invented their own, so a couple of different names depending on how you look into it as to who comes up on it. But anyway, so that was one of them. Another thing is he invented the boom mic. I mean, because he was in movie making before talkies, but when talkies came in, he used a fishing pole and then hung a mic from it. So there was, stuff like that.
That's actually really cool. So how long did you perform before becoming a duo act?
That's my whole life, kind of. I mean, let's call it what it is. When I got into the Mystics, that was my thing with magic and my friends, etc. Like I said, I was around 11 years old when I joined the Mystics. And so I was one of the younger kids. The different activities of the Mystics consisted of every few months they'd have a contest. They might have a lecture. They might have card night, bring a deck of cards. They'll teach you how to do some card tricks and different stuff like that. And when you wanted to be a member, you came to a couple of meetings to show them that you were interested, and then you told them you wanted to try out, and then you would do some tricks or whatever. Well, I saw Marvin Roy, Mr. Electric, on the Ed Sullivan Show, and he had one trick that he did that was a vanishing light bulb out of an egg bag and then appear in his pocket and back and forth. And I was impressed with that. So if you actually Google Marvin Roy's original act or one of the older deals, you'll see him doing that routine. Well, I out, and then that was my entrance into the club at about 11 years old. And then, like I said, they had different activities over the years. And another item that they would have as an activity was an auction, like once a year. And I would bring some items in there. And as the years went by and I'm, a teeny bop or whatever, I was pretty handy building stuff. So I was building a lot of my own stuff. And some of the older guys, Jim Mazalski, Howard McConaughey, that were teenagers, they took notice. And that's what kind of brought me to the forefront of doing that stuff. Well, at about age 16 or 17, now I have been the secretary of the club, and now I'm president of the Long Beach Mystics. And it was starting to die out. The club itself was run by a clique. And so it had its ups and downs. And that sounds negative, but it was a good thing, because the clique would, depending on how strong it was, it didn't, leave anybody out, but those that really showed interest and worked hard were accepted into that kind of fraternal part of the club. And so it was a kind of a passage there. And when people saw that I could build stuff, I got noticed. And then as I became the president of the club, I wanted to do more. So I added more things to make it so that it was more interesting, because it was the year before, it was kind of like dying out. There was only a few guys, and they says, "Hey, you want to disband the club?" I said, "No, man, it's my turn to be president." And so I came up with the annual show, which was called It's Amazing, that we put on once a year. And I had some people from Hollywood that were guests on the show. And Generally, it was our December meeting, which was our Christmas meeting, and we had hoped to get, every December would be like a show. And if we were lucky, we got maybe, 40 or 50 people that would show up, and we thought that was quite successful. So I went and did a show for Parks and Recreation, and in return, they let us use one of their clubhouses, which had a stage. And for that,
Who
I
all was
put
on the show?
well, it went out to the members, anybody who wanted to be on it. And at that time, it was the old guard. There was, there was nobody that you'd really know today other than James Hamilton, if you know of James, who passed away a couple of years ago, who was a charter member. He was on the show. I was on the show. Bob Scherzinger was on the show. Tom Gardner, Christy Gardner, his sister, was in the club. And did I say Eric Sadler? He was another one. It was quite a show. And we had, we put the invitation out there. It was a free show with refreshments, and hoping to get about 50 people to show. And to our surprise, we had about 120, and we packed the room. And everybody was impressed. Merlin Eifert, who was the head of sponsoring the club with Ring 96, passed the hat and took up a little donation for our club. And that was the start of it. And it became a big deal after that. And then we started having guest performers throughout the years, because not just the junior members, but we had one year Chuck Jones, another year we had Peter Pitt, another year we had, Diana Zimmerman, and and Dick Zimmerman, and the list went on as who's who, and we had quite a participation of people supporting the club over the years. And then as as Stan Allen came in, and then Mike Caveney about a year later, there was Paul Fiddler. We were putting on these shows, and they were really starting to get noticed, because the quality of the shows, we were very fortunate. Everybody, instead of just doing tricks, everybody had an act. And so that's how the club grew. And it lasted over a period of, I would say, about 30 years. So we had actually children of some of the members. I rattled off a number of the members that were known names at the beginning. Well, we also had from that Tom Gardner. I think his son was a member, and like I said, the later part of the years, the younger guys that came along were guys like Rick Thomas and Mark Kalin, Michael Weber, those guys. So, but there was a long-lasting, some really strong guys. I remember when I got a call from Kevin James, and he grew up in the Midwest, and he had heard about the club, and said he was moving out to Long Beach area, and I invited him to the meeting, and then he became very active and an officer, and the legacy carried on. And so we got notoriety. And another thing was, they had I forget what year it was, but I know that I think Stan Allen, Mike Caveney, and Bill Smith were part of it. I don't know who else was on the show. I didn't go back there for it, but it was for the Abbott's convention. And I think at the convention was Matt King and Lance Burton. They weren't big shots then. They were teenagers as well. And they were quite impressed, and expressed.
What did you think of them as somewhat beginners back then?
Well, this goes back before they hit fame that I knew these guys. Because they're both younger than I am, but they were impressed with the club and all of that stuff. But they came out of, a situation like perhaps where you're at, where there might not be a lot of magicians. We're out here in California, where we had an IBM ring in Long Beach. We had the junior club, the Mystics. There was the Orange County Mystics, which is out in Anaheim by Disneyland, which was an adult club. You had a Society of American Magicians assembly, 22, out of Hollywood. And then you had Ring 21, which was another IBM ring out of Los Angeles. And then there was a Pasadena Guild. So you had a half a dozen magic clubs all within 30 minutes living here in the Southland. If you're not familiar with, Southern California, I mean, Long Beach, is 25 minutes out of LA. And,
That's what you get out of LA traffic.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, back in the day, we didn't have the traffic issues that you have today. And now it's like traffic second to none in the world. I mean, it's just bad. But anyway, so we started to get noticed, and then there was a Pacific Coast Association of Magicians convention. It was held in Long Beach. I think it was around 1966, and the Mystics were very active in participating in that. And now they've made quite a name for themselves. And one anecdotal funny story was, I believe, a friend of Stan Allen's, I don't think it was Stan, I think it was a friend of his, was in Ireland or London, I forget where. He was since out of magic. He was a businessman, and this goes back maybe 20 years ago, and he was in, or maybe 30 even, and he was on a trip over to either Ireland, England, I don't know. He goes into a magic shop, and the guy says, "Are you a magician?" "Well, I used to fool around with it when I was a kid." And he says, "Oh, where are you from?" He says, "I'm from Southern California." And the guy looked at him and says, "You weren't a Long Beach Mystic, were you?" And the guy, it almost knocked him over. He says, "Well, how would you know anything about the Long Beach Mystics?" And the guy that operated the shop says, "Well, everybody knows about the Long Beach Mystics." So, at any rate, he totally surprised to hear that they had built up, quite a reputation for themselves and a name, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's good.
Short answer to your question, huh?
Yeah. We're gonna take a side turn on this.
Okay.
What's something you did as an amateur that you would never do now?
That's a good question. Gosh, as an amateur that you'd never do now.
Or what's something recent that you wouldn't do again?
Well, I saw your little interview with David Sandy, and he mentioned, I think you asked him a similar question.
Yeah.
And he talked about doing, club dates, and how the atmosphere in society in comedy has changed, and it's not been for the better. And I've heard stories of comedians, Ron Anderson wanted to do stand-up comedy. I used to follow him when he'd go to the Comedy Store up in LA, and all these guys hoping to make a career. I mean, Letterman and Leno were nothing back then. I mean, they would come in on their motorcycle, Leno, and hope to get on that night and one day make it on the Carson show. Well, fast forward, they both become multimillionaires, having their own shows and stuff like that. But there were a lot of guys that didn't make it. And with that being said, some of these guys, you talk to a comedian today, they no longer want to do the college show circuit because they're just too anal. They don't get it. I mean, they're offended by some of the stuff that is done. I mean, comedy. I mean, they don't get, it's humor. I don't know. Somebody needs to smack them upside the head. There were a number of people and incidents. I'm sure you've heard them too. Whether it was maybe somebody at performing at the Magic Castle, and then they see some guy that they think his humor was off color or inappropriate, which was maybe a routine that was done for 40 years. Yeah. It's funny. I'm sorry. And I don't really have much patience with those people that have become anal. And rather than, the establishment writing an apology letter, my attitude would be more of, it's a private club for members of this art, and others are invited as their guests. And if it's a little over your head or you cannot handle it, you're 86. We don't need you here. Don't come back. And that's my patient's, attitude. And it's sad, but that's some of the changes that have taken place. And when I brought up David Sandy, obviously there's stuff like the comedy brazier trick or whatever that we all used to do. And I mean, depending on how you performed it, it's comedy, and it's funny. I'm sorry. It's like slipping on a banana peel.
Yeah.
You know what's going to happen, but you can watch it over and over, and that's humor. So I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Basically, to sum it up, you want David Sandy to slip on a banana.
A banana peel.
Yeah.
Instead of doing the comedy brazier trick, huh?
Yeah. So, what's some advice you would give someone that's starting out that wants to be a full-time magician?
Manufacture toilet paper.
Yeah.
I'm probably not the guy to ask that of, because, I diversified and invested money in real estate and other things. And I've had the best, be honest with you, I've had the best of both worlds. I didn't do it totally full time. It's been in the last 14 years that I managed to, make it up to that league of, I tell people it's like making it in baseball up to the major leagues. I didn't get to go to the World Series, but I made it up to, to the major leagues, and was blessed with some of the coolest things that you just go. I mean, it's a Cinderella story. I mean, I used to envy someone like Marvin Roy that did it his whole life. He was passionate about it. He loved magic till the day he died. He was like very, very passionate. And but as I saw his lifestyle of doing, working relentlessly 7 days a week for a year without a day off, I was fortunate in some of the things that, the most thing that I had ever been involved in was a show that ran for a month at a time, that, and then others that were maybe a 2-week gig, or that I did not have to. I had been offered shows to be booked, in Brazil, South America, and other places. That was a 6-month run. Well, guess what? After about a week of it, if you're not doing it for the money, I mean, I didn't need the money. I wanted the money. It's there, I'll take it. But I'm having a good time. After 2 weeks, the novelty is, of much of it for me is gone if you're in one spot.
Yeah.
Now, hey, my good friend Mark Kalin, he and his wife have traveled the world since he was a kid. I mean, he loves it. That's their life, and they did it. And more power to them. And those guys that are my colleagues that did it, that's great. I was able to come into the party and lick the chocolate off the frosting off of the cake, and that's it. I didn't have to do all the other miserable hard stuff that came along with, with it. So I've gotten to do, some really impressive gigs, as well as TV and all of that stuff, and travel, and made good money. So, and get to talk to you.
What a reward.
So,
you worked your way up to this.
Yes. So you have, so there's different aspects. So to try and answer your question, I would say, get an education. Like everybody I know, from, hey, Dale Solweck, teaches the Chavez course. I mean, he got his degree and he teaches at the college level, and still found time to travel to the Asian countries and perform and produce shows. Mike Caveney also, I think his degree was in radio and television. Although he didn't follow that passion, it helped out. But he's very diversified in the magic world, and he didn't have to do any one thing. He's not making all his money on one deal, but he's also a very smart guy as far as how he saved his money and put it away and did not live like a drunken sailor. So it depends on what's in your DNA. Hopefully you follow your passion. And if you can make a living at what you love to do, then it's not work. I think that's how, Marvin felt. You're doing what you love to do. So if you get an education knowing how to maybe market yourself and all of that stuff, those are the guys that I know that have been successful. So, and maybe have a plan B to where, if it right now, the guys with a plan B are doing Zoom shows, or maybe they're working, maybe they had to get another job in a field that they were pretty good at. But first and foremost, hey, do what you like to do. And if you're happy doing it, I feel that you're successful. I don't measure the success by how much money you make or any of that. So, and I've met one thing about magic, and you'll probably attest to this. You go to a magic meeting and you could be a 17-year-old kid talking to a 75-year-old guy, and you got something in common without that barrier of age between you. And, you have that common interest, and, or a guy could be a surgeon, and the other guy's a high school dropout. And the surgeon in that particular little episode of encounter at a magic convention, it might be the surgeon that's looking up to this high school dropout that is quite accomplished in his little sleights of what he does, and is well respected. And I found that to be the case growing up in the magic world. So, there's a statement made to me by my friend Dana Daniels. He told his dad or his mom that he really didn't feel like he fit in high school. He never found anything he liked. And it wasn't until he found magic that he goes, this is for me. And Dana, I remember a couple of acts that he first had when he was in the Mystics that bombed. And rather than giving up, he did a bubble act, he did a Geppetto act and stuff like that. And I think Dana's one of the funniest guys we have in this business today. Very creative and very, very entertaining. He's one of those acts that even though you've seen the act, every time you watch it, even though it's the same act, it's refreshing. And so, good for him. I don't know. Does that sound like decent advice?
Yeah. Is there anybody right now that you can think of that's a young, upcoming magician that you think could be the next big thing?
Oh, gosh. I'm terrible on names.
It's the travesty. No, I'm joking.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
This is where the ad comes in, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The official travesty. Anyway, what?
Yeah. I've seen a lot of great guys. I don't want to narrow it down to. There's been a couple of individuals that through the Magic Castle Juniors that I've gone up and been super impressed. We've all watched. Hey, look at Shin Lim on. When that show first, America's Got Talent, first came out, I thought, they're not going to be pushing anything but singers and rock star type of people. The thought of a novelty act ever winning, I never conceived of it. And here they've not only had him, but the other guy, I think there's been a couple.
Yeah,
but anyway.
Matt Franco.
Yeah.
Was that?
Franco.
Yeah.
Was another one, right?
Yeah, Matt Franco.
Matt Franco, yeah. And then, and there's numerous other guys that have come along that have been on the show that it's worked out. Now, the show itself, talking about TV, it's an enjoyable show. Number one, it's a TV show, so always keep that in mind. It's all about what every second counts.
Yeah.
And of the 2 dozen or more friends that I've had that have appeared on it. It's been a good deal for a good number of them, but there's also a number of them that says, you know what, I wish I'd never done it, to where they got kind of sucker punched. And
It's all on if they want you to look good, I think.
yeah, it's, you know, I mean, my wife and I watched Dancing with the Stars. Okay, that tells you something there. That's like today's Lawrence Welk show, and it's a show, and I look at it to where, you know, it's all about making it palatable to, you know, who their audience is, and the reason I bring that show up versus some of the other shows is that the other shows, they're vying for a big cash prize or stardom or a career. Okay. This thing, it's generally washed up people, not washed up, but, you know, celebrities that are on a hiatus and maybe looking for something to do to put a spark in their career. They go on there and they get more exposure in a different way, which is positive. I enjoy the show. I'm interested in that type of thing. And what are they doing? They're doing it out of love and for bragging rights for a mirror ball, not for $500,000 or $1 million.
Yeah.
So if it's slanted or if it's biased in any way, like a contest is, I mean, the only kind of contest that's really legit is a popularity contest. If you go to your local IBM ring or something, you know, and you have a contest, and everybody says, I like so and so. He might not be the best who won. Hey, he was the most popular. Everybody liked him. So that, you know, it's hard to get away from it. And getting back to, you know, America's Got Talent, you know, they're giving out a cash thing and there's something at stake, yada, yada. Whereas maybe Dancing with the Stars, if you get booted off, okay, you got booted off, but you know, so you didn't lose anything other than, you know, hope. It was a fun game. It's like any game you play. But anyway, so that's my philosophy on that.
All right. Have you ever had your act stolen, physical props, or mentally?
Yeah, I had a Lester Lake guillotine and a broom suspension stolen. And
Like the physical prop?
yeah, the physical prop. And person's no longer with us that I think, you know, was, you know, responsible for it. I had insurance, so I made out that way. But yeah, but for the most part, that's about it. I mean, I'm not a type of person that, you know, a lot of guys, they're known for their originality. I mean, most of my stuff, there's a few maybe twists, but I'm not heavy into the game full. Like I said, I had a second career. So consequently, I wasn't really much of a threat to anybody either during my years in Magic. So you don't have people that are jealous. You don't have people that are envious. You don't have people that, you know, resent you for it. So I know of no enemies. Yeah. If you know of anybody that hates my guts, don't tell me about it. But that's, yeah, I've been, you know, so right. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
I mean, sure, yeah. What was the hardest thing for you to learn and the hardest thing for you to perform?
You know, like I said, I'm not a sleight of hand artist guy. I build props. And so to answer that question would be kind of tough, other than you think something's going to be, you know, a good trick, and it just doesn't work. And I would say, you know, in recent years, with the act that we do, I had a different motivation for building a prop that was, it's a miniature army tank. And this thing's about 6 feet long, 3 feet wide, about 3 foot high. And it actually, out of the barrel, I can shoot T-shirts or confetti out. And it's got treads and the whole, it's really cool looking. And we put that in the act when we were working a week at the Magic Castle for a few days to see. And the theme, and it was like a jumbo sidekick on steroids. Is anybody who's interested or experienced or familiar with Jumbo Sidekick? It's where somebody selects a card, and then you commence to find the card, like a me and other card trick deals, and in a comedy way. In other words, the guy's given a pistol in Jumbo Sidekick, and he aims at a goblet on the table that has a big deck of cards in it. And the first thing that happens is that the little trim on the table falls off when he shoots the gun. And then he shoots the gun again, and the flower that's in the vase pops out. And then he shoots the gun again, and the entire table collapses or something. And there's one card sticking there, and it's, instead of being the 3 of diamonds, it's the 2 of diamonds. Or maybe it's vice versa. Instead of it being the 2 of diamonds, it's the 3 of diamonds, and they shoot the gun and the other little diamond falls off or something. So that's Jumbo Sidekick. Well, I did it with basically, doing it where, Dazzle comes out and we're doing a card trick, and the guy, he fires the gun at a deck of cards that Dazzle's holding, and the plume of her hat gets shot off. And then the next thing, she comes out with a bazooka, and then the next thing, the bazooka's fired, and it hits me in the groin with a T-shirt that's got the card on it. It's the wrong card. And then she comes out driving this army tank. And the point that I'm getting at, and then it shoots confetti, and she vanishes from being in the tank, and the whole tank vanishes and reappears in the audience. I like the trick. I think it's a good trick, but it wasn't for our character. It did not fit. We took it out. I mean, we tried it 3 nights, and it still had some bugs, but, for somebody else, it would be,
That sounds awesome.
And actually it's for sale. I've got it up for, anybody would be interested.
We'll talk after.
Yeah. And, but I mean, I first built the damn thing to ride in a parade as a gag. And I drove it in a parade because I made this General Patton get up that had all the medals and, Medal of Honor and that thing. So that's a whole nother story. Stuff like we used to do in the Mystics. Besides magic, would be in parades and God knows what. But yeah, that didn't work. So I don't know if that kind of goes along with part of your question. I mean, you're just searching for a story.
All right. Well, let's see if we can pull some random stuff out that people don't know about you. Do you have any weird talents that you can think of that people don't know about you?
Weird talents?
Weird talents.
Probably not that's any weird to a magician. I mean, I rode a unicycle. I juggled. I did magic. I could build stuff. I built a house. I built a doll house. I built so from a doll house to the house I'm in right now, all of that kind of stuff.
That's pretty good.
I built props for other people. For an old guy, I'm a pretty good dancer, I guess. I don't know. You name that. I can't sing with a darn. But yeah, sorry, there's nothing,
So for the next thing, we'd like you to sing a song now.
Yeah, right.
Do you have any crazy touring stories? Everyone has at least one.
Oh gosh. Which direction are you leaning that's of interest to you? I mean, they're all been great fun.
I mean, it could be something that went terribly wrong. It could be something that went terribly right. I mean, just.
Well, okay. Yeah. Well, you talk about touring. Okay, we did a week, a little more than a week, in Monte Carlo, at Princess Grace Theater in Monaco, and so we flew into Paris, and we did this thing, and we were on the show with I think Arthur Trace was on the show with us, Magic Wave. There was Paola. There was Luzanne or something from China or something, and some other names I don't remember offhand. It's an annual thing. A lot of guys have done it. Quite impressive deal. And I mean, when you say the story, I mean, this thing was like really cool. The theater, you go in there, the Princess Grace Theater is a small theater. It's not much bigger than the Palace of Mystery at the Magic Castle. I think it seats only like, the Palace of Mystery seats 130. And this thing, I think, sat about 250, if that. Very small, intimate theater. And they flew me over there, paid me good money. They put us up, gave me 2 rooms at the Fairmont, which is right around the corner, and a posh hotel right on the water where the race goes, past it and all that. Yeah. Flew my equipment over there, and I went to the box office and asked them how much the tickets were for this thing, thinking, God, they must be an arm and a leg, because I'm looking at all the other acts that came from all over the world, and it was reasonable. It was like $30 to $35 or euros, one of the two. So if it was euros, it's like $50, I guess. But yeah. They and I am counting the seats. I'm going, this doesn't add up. And every night there was something other special. I mean, the first night they had a banquet for us, and they had music, and they had dancing, and the entire crew, was there in the complex, and all of the acts. They had a party, and then the next day they had a thing with a press deal where we all got together. We took pictures and we posed with the Prince of Monaco. We met the Prince of Monaco and took pictures with them, and then. That night he came to the show, and then the next day they put us on a bus, and we went to the mayor's mansion and had a lunch with the mayor. And everywhere we went, they had a guy that was a musician that's playing background music. So like when you're watching a movie of like driving through Paris and you hear accordion music in the background, we're on a bus to go to this guy's mansion. And there's a guy on the bus playing the accordion. It's like I was like living in a scene from a movie. I mean, I can't explain it. It was like, how cool is this? And we had got a lot of chuckles out of that. And then the next day, they did the same thing, and we go out to this cocktail party at the Prime Minister's mansion, and hobnobbing with all. And you got the set in the background that you're seeing is all of the multi-million-dollar yachts that you see in the movies. And so once again, you're like in a James Bond movie at a cocktail party. I mean, I got to tell you, it was cool.
Sounds
and
really
so, and every day they had something going like that, including up to the last day. So besides doing the show, they kept you entertained. And it was just like the whole time you're going, this is like really cool. I mean, and you go, you go this and you'd pinch yourself going, God, is it real? So, that's just, and I've had a whole hell of a lot of those kind of stories, but I don't know if that's
it's pretty cool
to you, but it was, and I mean, I've had working with celebrities. There was a TV show called Circus of the Stars, and I taught magic to oh God, what's his name? Glenn Ford. And so, I worked with him and Merv Griffin on that.
That's cool.
That was fun. So there was, weird stories, and that was neat. And as much as Dirk Arthur had sold them on doing the birds he produced out of a big tubular cone, and they bought it, and then he got booked to go to South America and couldn't do the gig, and called me and asked if I could go and teach Glenn Ford this stuff. So I said, sure. He gave me the props, and I'm waiting for him to show up. They sent some little minivan that had circus stuff painted all over. When they got to his mansion, he says, where's the limo? And they says, well, we have this minivan. He says, well, when you come back with the limo, I'll be ready to go.
Oh, man.
So he shows up, a few hours late. I worked with him for about an hour, And we were doing a thing with, you know how you show, a little temple screen or something that would be like, let me take this back. I'll use a piece of paper. Let's say you want to show this paper, okay, and you got a load back here, underneath it, right?
Mhm.
And so you've got to bring the paper up like this here, and you're showing both sides of the thing, right? And then of course you roll it into a cone, and then you do your production.
Mhm.
That's what the trick was. Well, Glenn Ford, or not, yeah, I mean, we worked a whole hour on him doing this, entire hour of him just taking and without a load, just bringing the paper up like that. Obviously, it was bigger than this,
Yeah.
but every time he would do it, he would go like this, and he wasn't getting it, let alone rolling the thing. And there were a couple of kiss asses in the room there that were always, oh, that's beautiful, sucking up to him, which wasn't doing him any good.
Yeah.
And I was courteous and I was patient. I was a teacher. I said, well, hey, let's give it another shot, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the session, when these other guys would go, oh, yeah, that's great. The one guy that had some brains, it was one of the producers, came up and said, he's not going to be able to do this, is he? I said, no. And so they had committed. He had a contract. He's probably getting paid 10 grand for this performance. And so they asked, and I bailed their asses out. And I brought in, instead of doing that, Doves from the Air, Dove Catch Net, and a Blammo box that, he produced a couple of birds out of a top hat that had a load in it. He then produced, and had an assist. I was acting during rehearsals as his assistant, just taking stuff out of his hand and putting stuff in to make it work so he would have a successful run.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was interesting how that whole thing down. There were some guys that, that were in there that, was with the people they were trying to teach. It didn't happen. It got cut and never made air. But this made air, and they were happy, so everybody was happy. Another interesting anecdote of life and magic.
So, obviously, you've probably learned a lot from your family in magic. Is there something that stands out as a piece of advice that helped improve your act, or?
Well, not from where you're going at it with. In other words, it didn't happen within the Leon trail there. It was the adopted family of the Long Beach Mystics, and my colleagues and my friends that I had in magic, and that you learn from each other. The guys that, family was, my grandfather passed away when I was 5. So other than bouncing on his knee, I had no relationship, that I recall other than that experience. My uncle, I got into magic independently of his interest in magic. And so therefore, and I wasn't around or saw him that often. And then when I was involved in magic, I mean, it was like independently picking up and doing what I was doing, and the type of magic that was totally different from him. I would, I'm now a teenager and then older in a young adulthood during all of that. And I would go to a magic convention. I would, run into, my relatives there, my uncle and my aunt. They were active in the Hollywood crowd I'm active in one of them, the SAM with them. But we were very much independently and didn't really run in the same circles. We would see each other at, at shows and stuff at conventions, but that was about it. And I mean, we would talk, family stuff, and Thanksgiving we got together, but it really wasn't the connection in magic, believe it or not. Isn't that something? So
that's interesting. Now, this could be dead or alive. Who would you put on like your Mount Rushmore of magic? Who are the greatest overall performers that you've seen?
Well, just out of Kansas City, there's this guy named Travis. I hear great things about. Um, that's a good question. I mean, there are different people that have expertise in different stuff. I mean, I made a remark to my nephew, who's 18 years old, that about a month ago, and I made reference to David Copperfield, which is an icon in magic. And his response was, "Who's David Copperfield?
Oh man,
Well, he's not into magic."
yeah.
And I said, "Only the world's greatest magician." I looked at him and said, "Have you ever heard of Houdini?" Okay. Now, Houdini, as a young man in magic, being a teenager, when I first got in, there were people alive, family members of mine, as well as magicians that I got to know through the SAM IBM that knew Houdini personally, okay, besides my grandfather, and saw him. So it was a first-hand deal. It wasn't like in your case to where this is a guy that you've heard of and read about, but, came along, died long before you were born.
Yeah.
And he died before I was born. But he made a legacy for himself. And those that knew Houdini, he wasn't that great of a magician from what I hear. But he was excellent, and obviously, as promoting Houdini. And I heard stories of people that worked with him back then. These older guys at George Boston and stuff was telling me the story of how he'd go out, he'd go into play some small town, and he'd find some guy that lived in that town, maybe Travis, that had passed away, and he'd make a big deal of how the townspeople never, paid homage to this local person, and he'd go out and put, flowers on Travis's grave, and and he'd get front page article how Houdini honors local magician, blah. He had that aspect. Well, now take it from if you want to know, who's made the biggest footprint in this field in our lifetime. There's no question that Copperfield, the guy's a billionaire.
For sure.
And he still performs. He loves to perform. It's his passion, and magic has always been his passion. And he's very talented, and he's good. I personally have a great respect for David, and all the things he's done and accomplished. His specials have been second to none. He puts on a great show, and to this day, here it is, 40 years later, that he's still doing this stuff. And so I don't see anybody bigger than him. Everybody's got their favorites. Your generation will talk about Di Vernon and as an icon. Well, growing up, he was the guy that he was always around, and he's been much bigger in death than he was live, because he was just Di Vernon, and he did great stuff, but it was wonderful. But when you no longer have them and you start to miss them, and if you didn't do a stage act back in his era, it was like you didn't make a living doing strolling. It was and close-up was unheard of, and that's what he was a master at. So you have to put all that stuff into perspective. So I would,
let's phrase it this way: who's your 4 favorite of all time?
Well, obviously, people that they're different connections that I have with individuals. Like I said, I was, for the time growing up, that impressed me was John Daniel, and he first class all the way. He's passed away. His widow, Kathy, still lives out in Pasadena. Lovely, fantastic assistant. They had a great show, and a really good guy. So, and friend. And I've been fortunate to know, individuals as friends, not just somebody that I've seen on TV or on stage and idolized. So I'm tainted in that respect rather than maybe just looking at it from, talent wise. Obviously, Marvin and Carol Roy. I mean, Marvin was, like I told you the story earlier, here's a guy that when we went out to go see him as kids, and he takes us out and buys us Cokes and talks our ear off for 30 minutes, or 3 hours between his shows, and spends time with us. And that's how he was with everybody in Magic. Marvin was a great guy. I have the utmost respect for him. That era, you had Channing was another great act. Johnny Hart was a great dove act, a bird act, and you had, those were guys of my era. I mean, you can't help but think of Siegfried and Roy. I mean, another killer act, as well as Doug Henning. So these are all the greats that, it's not just, and then there's all my friends that are extremely talented that I've named off all their names, that have traveled with, the Illusionist, and worked at the Magic Castle, that, that are just great, wonderful people. And when they're your buddies, when I say your buddies, I mean, these are guys that we don't get together to do, that it's magic. I mean, we go and say, hey, I get together, and we go to lunch. We go to an event that has nothing to do with magic. These are my friends. They just all happen to become well known in magic, and they and whether they build props, publish magazines, publish books, perform, they do it all. I mean, and these are the guys I grew up with, that I've known, like I told you earlier, who was as young as, Mark Kalin, I think, was 12 years old when I met him. So these guys that you knew before fame came, and when I met Copperfield, he wasn't famous then. He was living in a small apartment, without any money at the time. So, but it's not about money. It's about, your interest in magic. Yeah. And so there's a lot of great guys, and the guys that you meet as you go along, and that you do stuff with. David, Sandy, Lance. I mean, these are guys I have the utmost respect for. And sorry I couldn't pin it down to, an icon or anything, but it goes down that avenue.
In a real life sense, who do you think you've learned the most from?
Oh, gosh. It's, I couldn't answer that. I really couldn't, because you're living in a community of a lot of talented people that are your friends. Yeah. And as mystics, that's what we used to do. We would criticize, and if we thought something stunk, we'd tell you, that was lousy. You need to drop that. Or, they got good criticism. And so it's like a family. It's like, living in an Indian tribe or something, 200 years ago. I mean, that's the way it worked. I mean, you were accepted and you were part of the family. So I've been blessed with, all these guys are just great friends, and all the wonderful people that I've met, in the magic world. All right. Without really naming anybody, tell you the truth. Sorry about that.
That's all right. If you had an unlimited budget in your show, what is one thing you would do to improve it?
Hire somebody else to do my part, I guess. I don't know. It's good question, but with the times and what I've been through, what I've seen, and I wasn't really restricted by money, because I didn't have to fork out, like some of my colleagues that would spend, $6,000 to $20,000 or maybe more for an illusion. That wasn't my problem. I mean, if there was something I wanted, I could build it. So that wasn't really, something that would be an issue. Yeah.
All right. So for the beginner magician, let's say they have $100 starting off. What would you recommend them do with it?
I should have paid attention when you asked that question of David. Uh, $100 for what they do with it.
Yeah.
I don't think
There's no right answer.
there's no way of
No
answering
wrong answer.
without knowing the individual, because it's a personal thing.
Yeah.
And it's like the magic that I'm interested in versus the magic that you're interested in, or some other kid. I don't know what's going to float his boat. One kid, it's gonna depend on maybe he wants lessons from somebody. Maybe somebody else, they need to buy materials, or they need to buy pay for choreography. They need to pay for music, which, when you look at the top acts, they've had people that were consultants that helped them out. And I don't care whether that's Mark Kalin or David Copperfield. They got a Don Wayne or Jim Steinmeier that they've gone to, that they've paid, to collaborate. I mean, let's face it, Steinmeier worked for many years with Doug Henning, so it wasn't all coming from one individual. When you have resources, then you can hone in. That the average magician, they don't have that. It's their deal, and so you got somebody that, they might be lucky in this small little world they live in, like in my own case. Whereas, the bigger you get, and popular, you have resources. So if there's something that you can hone in on that happens to be you, that you can play up. I've talked to magicians that, that maybe they have a music background. They play that into it. And you can use that as a gimmick to enhance what you're doing. I mean, I had a daughter that could act goofy and could dance. That enhanced and made me look better. Someone else, they themselves move really good. Or like they're a sleight of hand artist, whatever. Others that I know that, did tricks with unusual animals. All of those things gave you a gimmick. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. In other words, you're looking for something that sets you apart or that makes you happy. Wasn't really something that tried to set me apart, because that wasn't my main goal in life. I went after the tricks that at the time just I enjoyed or wanted to build something, so it didn't have an ulterior motive.
So going off that, let's say this person wanted to be an illusionist. Is there any specific books you would recommend?
Well, there's any of that kind of stuff. Any book. When we were younger, the Harbin book came out, and there's been a whole lot of other books that have illusions in there. And if you're a builder, every time you build something, you get better at it. I've taught kids how to build stuff, and I had students that went on to, I had a student, of course he was 13 years old when I met him, and I was in my late 20s, or maybe 30. I think it was maybe 32 at the time. And his name is Nick. Hey, he went on to assist me when he was like 20 years old in the act. We did some TV shows together. He was interested in magic. The first day of school when we first met, he came up, "Hey, Mr. Arnold, I'm going to be in your woodshop class. I want to build some magic." And he was very persistent. Consequently, I had him in class every semester that he was there. If not taking the class, he was my TA. And Nick, he was also interested in music. So, but he also went into building cabinets and stuff. And when I built this custom home, I had him do all my kitchen cabinets. I couldn't do it all. So, there's just, depending on what seems to fit the individual and what their talents are, if you can discover. So it's, I know that's kind of a vague answer, but I don't know, did that kind of help you at all?
Yeah. Let's see. Is there something you failed at and you learned from it?
Well, of course. I mean, show me somebody who never failed, and I'll show you somebody who never succeeded in anything. And that's the biggest thing. One thing about the Mystics, growing up with that club, we had contests, and then you got critiqued and stuff. And I mentioned Dana Daniels. He had developed a couple of acts. The Geppetto Act, the Bubble Act, number of things that didn't go the way he wanted it to. There was some of the stuff that he liked. It was good. Hey, you try it and it doesn't work. And you either, like the story I was telling you about the tank. I mean, it's not that it didn't work, but I failed at meeting the objective of fitting in to the act that we were doing. Now, if you're a hobbyist, that is just, you work at a plant, or you work at a store, or you're a businessman or a salesman, and you do a few card tricks for entertainment. You got the freedom to just try and do anything you want, whatever makes you feel good. That's all. Like, I never did strolling magic, but when I was young and single, yeah, I'd carry around a thumb tip and a squirting nickel, okay, in my pocket. And I also had, I could do a few, tricks. I could do about maybe 5 minutes, entertain somebody with a napkin and blah, blah, blah. But it was just something to break the ice. But no, that was not my forte. Whereas other people, they're good at certain things. So you go down that avenue of what you feel comfortable with. And everybody's going to be different. And when you're exposed, like I was, to the Long Beach Mystics and my peer group, then you have a great source. And living here in Southern California, where you had the half a dozen magic clubs, magic shows, TV shows, as well as the Magic Castle to be involved with, you've got a heads up, as opposed to somebody who maybe lived or grew up on a farm someplace. So it does make a difference.
When you started in magic, what was some of the tricks that like a lot of people used to do that you don't see much of now?
It's going to be stuff that they bought out of a catalog.
Yeah.
I mean, and it wasn't sophisticated stuff. It was general props. I mean, let's face it. If you're a member of local magic club, it wasn't unheard of to see somebody, a square circle, a change bag, a die box. These are all standard tricks that everybody in the club had. The silk cabbie. The other guys that had like sleight of hand were doing card manipulations, back palms, fans, billiard balls, that kind of thing. And that was like, those are the guys that get interested in magic. They do that. And then if they're interested and they stay with it, they start to branch out and they start to see what's out of their own little realm of things. And they see other stuff, and they're motivated by other magicians.
Is there a certain trick that you think should be more common now, but isn't?
More common?
Yes.
Not really. I mean, the world has changed from when I was growing up. I mean, if you didn't see it live, then you read about it in a book. And I wasn't very good at trying to do sleights, from looking at holding the thing, this way, and then taking the thing and doing the pass and all of this other kind of stuff. It's difficult. Whereas today, you have the internet, and, technology has changed everything. You could go to a magic show and sit there and watch. You're enjoying somebody saw a lady in half, and then you pull out your phone and go, how did they cut a lady? And they're telling you how to do it right there. Yeah. Whereas if you were interested back in my day, you had to go to the library and check out a book. Or if you didn't figure it out yourself, you went to the magic meeting and your buddies, and you know, it's the environment you're around that you learn from.
Going off that, do you think that people are more skilled now or back then?
No, it changes. It's just different. There's there's uh, there's different things. For example, growing up, when we went into a theater, there weren't any trap doors left in theaters that they used that were quite plentiful in vaudeville days. And then, of course, and so the thought in my era of being a teenager or young 20s, I mean, uh, the Keller levitation or the flying that the Copperfield does was unthinkable to do. You just wouldn't be able to pull it off. And or doing stuff where you go in traps. But then now you fast forward to when magic is popular, and you got the show from the Mirage that Siegfried and Roy did, or that Lance Burton did at the Monte Carlo in Las Vegas. They're using traps. They're using stuff coming down from the ceilings. They're doing all of that stuff that you wouldn't have had the opportunity to do when I was younger. And as things change now to where, you know, it's got this up and down curve that things come and go, that would be, you know, ways of doing things. So it's all relative to the time and what you have at your disposal, as to whether or not it's going to fly. So I don't know if that answered your question and went down that avenue.
Yep. So, Les, we've reached the final segment where I'll ask you lightning quick questions to get to know you better as a person. Are you ready?
Yeah, good luck on that. Make them easy, will you?
What's your favorite color?
Blue.
Favorite cereal?
Would be Cheerios.
Do you think cereal is just cold soup?
Probably. I don't know. I haven't given it that much thought.
Apple or Android?
Are we talking computers?
Computers or phone?
Oh, neither. Let's go back to our old dial phone.
Okay. Does pineapple belong on pizza?
Yeah.
And finally, what is your pet peeve in magic?
Exposure. So, I mean, you know, I know that I watched your interview with David. You asked him that question. He hemmed and hawed for about a minute, if not longer. But you don't need, magic's only good as long as it's fun and a mystery, because that's what you're doing. It's no more entertaining than if you went to a comedy store and says, "Oh, this is the guy that has the joke that I can't remember it, but the punchline, and your mother wore a funny hat." You know, now you've blown the punchline, and you've ruined it for the person that's going to go in there, and the people that we all know that as magicians, to tell a secret or show how it's done is spoiling it. And now we all have situations, whether it's in your case, you might have a nephew. Okay. I'm assuming you don't have children, do you?
No.
Okay. So if it's a little kid, maybe there's something you wanted that you will share with them. And there's some exceptions. I mean, even my grandfather had, there were magazine articles, and they had the tricks that they would show and that you could learn. To an extent, some of those, you get it. They're premiums to sell a product. That's okay. I'm not going to, bag on somebody for that, or an accident, and everybody's had them to where something's exposed. Don't dwell on it. Move on. If you blow a trick, don't draw attention to it. The audience, half the time, they don't know what happened. Just move on. There you have it.
All right. So, for final thoughts here, do you have anything to say to the people at home watching?
Well, I hope I didn't bore the hell out of you for one thing, and I wish you all the best in the year to come. That we get out of this pandemic and have fun with magic. Keep watching and participating, and I wish everybody good health and wealth, and have a great year. Okay.
Well, Les, thanks for agreeing to be interrogated.
Hey, it was fun, Travis, and I wish you all the best in your endeavors, and hope that you can get some, good interviews. People that you and I have spoken about. I think you got some great people coming up, and those that are out there viewing this. Hey, there's going to be a lot of great guys that he's got lined up for you. So all the best to you, and I wish everybody well. All right,
Awesome. Thanks.
take care.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. Special thank you to Les Arnold for joining me. And if you want to see more videos, this Friday, next Friday, every Friday after that until I quit, they'll be up. So have a day. Enjoy.
Follow the official travesty at Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or email him at theofficialtravesty@gmail.com.
Like, comment, and subscribe, or else.
My name is Les Arnold, and I've been interrogated.